Presence of a villain in the building, and ain't nobody found a way to kill him. You got a heart made of blades in his chest, strapped with the vest. So come up on your tech to the test. Don't open up your mouth for a sec. Homie, you ain't saying shit that affects the love and respect I have for the next.
If you're trying to get vexed, you can come and get wrecked by the best. Fuck silence!
The Disciples Audio Animation by Stereo Stages.
Safe places in the world dwindle by the day. New beings of seemingly infinite power are born into existence with abhorrent regularity. Few match the scale of Kholegh Moare's influence and chaotic capabilities. This god is the embodiment of something older than knowledge or emotion. It is a primal consciousness. It has been said that awareness itself derives from the power wielded by this god. So far-reaching is the influence of this god's madness that it has reshaped the world, subtle in some ways, extreme in others. As seems to be the pattern, the god's awakening was preceded by a fitting and gruesome incident. Northwestern Europe, the Netherlands. Although fear and panic had been escalating globally, more of these so-called gods emerged, unstoppable and unyielding. Something beyond the typical hysteria spread through the area. It started with civil unrest. Murmurs of the fearful soon turned into thunderous roars of dissent. At first, the angry crowds were furious with their government. Gathering outside the internal court of justice, the protesting quickly turned to violence. Like many other parts of the world, crowds smashed and burned anything in their way. But after the United Nations branch was set ablaze, something happened, unlike the rest of the world. The building was full of people, some working, some there to raise concerns, and some children kept close by their parents for safety. None escaped the blaze. Barred and barricaded doors saw to that. The angry mob was unsympathetic to their screams and indifferent to their deaths. The only way I would have been able to describe it at the time would be madness. But after seeing unrestrained madness released on the world, this was but a mild precursor. I would guess that the destruction of an institution representing order and justice throughout the world was more than just a symbolic action. Couple that with the deaths, and those fools triggered events that could not be undone. As the screaming and raging throng swept through the street like a chaotic wave, one unidentified man stood still. The bodies surged around him, an island in a violent sea. The street cameras captured footage of this man, appearing almost lost or unaware of his surroundings. His facial expressions began to change rapidly, as if he were a digital reader board, from elation to fear, tears of sorrow to profound confusion. The shifting aspects came and went even faster. His features even began to shift, as if someone were toggling options of a video game character creation. People surged past him, consumed with their lust for destruction, and not even aware they were amid yet another god's dawn into this plane. The man's swirling features both stopped transitioning and became something else entirely. To describe the effect fully would be to understand something not of this world. My best explanation would be to say that the man's face was gone, replaced with a seamless skin layer. But this layer of skin was thin and translucent. Underneath it was an ever-changing and shifting mix of facial features that were simultaneously constant and fluctuating. This chaotic visage was both unique and unidentifiable. It was every face you'd ever seen, and none of them. While the man's change became more profound, the crowd still passed him by, seemingly unable to spot the contradictory being now in their midst. That was until the man became the focus of a new era. He grabbed a passing man by the throat, lifting him above his shifting face that now seemed to pulse with patterns of grayscale light. The helpless man struggled futilely against the inhuman grip, eyes wide with fear. As those who've been given the incomprehensible forms of madness have become known, the incarnate reached a hand up to the struggling man's forehead. Gnarled and elongated, the fingers began to vibrate like a hummingbird's wings. The blurred claw slid into the man's forehead with no resistance. A scream escaped this man's mouth as the incarnate dragged a vibrating finger down the middle of his face to his chin. After completing an unknown ritual, the incarnate dropped the still screaming man to the street and let those around it witness what was to be their fate. A long, gory line traced down the man's face, spurting blood in time with his racing heart. He reached up to his face with shaking hands. That's when people started to notice the scene. Something was entirely off about the wound inflicted upon him. Underneath the torn flesh, where the incarnate had ripped his face, was an esoteric shimmer. The man's head began to shake and seize violently, too fast to make out the shifting array of facial expressions. Then, the man started pulling at the tear in his face. People in the crowd started screaming and panicking at this point. Several tried to restrain the self-mutilating man. It was to no avail. The strength of this deranged man was extraordinary. He showered the horrified crowd in blood and pieces of flesh. Both hands furiously tore at each side, healing from the torn line until the gory strips freed from his head. His similarly gnarled and twisted fingers removed all delicate pieces from his head before plunging into his eye sockets to remove the offending orbs. As he pulled them out, the optic nerves snapped with a sickening wet crack that seemed to resound with an unreasonably high volume. While he systematically maimed his face, a maddened bellow escaped from the exposed skeletal jaws, becoming more inhuman by each and every act of dismemberment. The shrieking finally stopped when he tore the tongue from his own mouth, dropping it to the blood-covered street where he rested on his knees. Mostly, the screaming had stopped. A crowd surrounded the man, who no longer resembled the people around him. His skull was mostly exposed. Random fragments of flesh still clung to the horrific figure. As more people became aware that something was happening, the chanting and screaming ceased almost entirely. The crowd was silent, confusion and indecision spreading through them like a disease. A low, multi-toned hum came from within the incarnate. People only now noticed something else amongst them, and only now realizing it was likely the cause of whatever had just happened to the mutilated man. At the ethereal hum's resonance, the kneeling man's skull snapped to attention, his empty, leaking sockets staring at the incarnate. His skinless head tilted like a dog hearing a strange noise. and a responding hum answered its call. What was once two men communicated in a way that was not of this earth. Shifting and blurry, the incarnate's face pulsed a dull gray glow. In response, the man's skull began to glow and throb. The defined shape of it wavered, taking on the properties of something unknown. The man rose to his feet. His skull was now amorphous and shifting, changing in both shape and density by the second, comparable to a lava lamp, but much more chaotic and positively more terrifying. With no provocation, the amorphous skulled man grabbed the arm of a nearby woman. She screamed and struggled to break free, but his strength was unearthly. A split formed in his skull, opening it vertically. The inconceivable construct closed around the woman's arm and began to compress. Her scream shifted from one of horror to a much higher and louder pitch of agonizing pain. Several in the crowd tried to pull them apart, while several more hit and kicked the altered man. Their efforts were ineffective until their pulling separated the woman from her trapped arm. They all fell backward to the ground from the sudden release of tension. The woman's ragged stump fountained blood as her scream faded to unconsciousness. What happened next was the real problem. Several people started stomping on the aberrant man. One man's foot sunk into the amorphous head. What had just happened to the woman repeated with his foot and ankle. Simultaneously, the ruined flesh of the woman's arm started to waver and gray. The dizzying effect spread to her torso, and as her body lifted itself, head hanging limply with open but distant eyes like a coma patient, someone tried to steady her while looking around for help. The woman's torso opened and clamped around the person, tearing into them, infecting them. All around, the hysteria spread, the aberrant tearing into the natural, cleaving their flesh and minds. What happened wasn't a destruction of bodies. That was merely a side effect. This was a conversion. Those who could not flee from the packed streets were turned into something else by those who once sought to escape alongside them. Soon, the only ones left were a brutalized group of 100 or so shimmering forms. One by one, the bodies coalesced into an amalgamation of otherworldly flesh, piling into each other and melding into a grotesque mound of wavering meat. The tissue formed what loosely resembled a vibrating archway. Only one form remained, the incarnate. It strode to the arch, shifting features awash of unfamiliar shapes and patterns. As the gray lights from within started pulsing in a chaotic but intentional sequence, the archway responded. The colorless flesh mirrored the incarnate's instruction, shimmering and shifting in shape to take on a more defined form. The creature of madness continued shaping and refining the mass until intricate details and runes were etched into the flesh. Once this was complete, the awakening of Kholegh Moare came to pass. Placing its hand on the center of the flesh gate, the incarnate unlocked the door. Its body wavered in and out of the visible spectrum like a mirage. In slow jittering motions, it was sucked into the amalgamation, and for a moment, all was still. Then, in the center of the gate, opened a rend in reality. The flesh peeled away from the back and fed into the void. As more of the meat was consumed, the larger the tear became. It gave all of itself to the breach and made way for the next god. The hollow in reality fluctuated in indescribable patterns, looping and twisting in shapes beyond understanding. A gray figure stepped out from the rend, born anew. Its skin was pulled tight over a fluctuating frame made of sharp angles. It was as if there were several copies of this creature, all fighting to be made physical. The god's head almost resembled a skull, having no lips and only labyrinthian holes for its nose and ears. Several rows of revolving horns curled around its head, meeting in the back like a multi-layered crown made of swirling storms of chaotic energy. Black eyes were set deep within protruding bony sockets. Thin, wiry muscle striations carved lines under its shifting shape. With a single, departing action, the god of madness tilted its head to look directly at the street camera. Its body flashed and wavered several times before it vanished, leaving behind only blood and discarded flesh unused in the ritual. Kholegh Moare holds no territory, and it is unknown where he resides, but you can tell where he has been. A single touch is enough influence for a town to rip itself apart. The destruction left in his wake is more horrifying than the aftermath of a nuclear bomb. Several cities have already fallen victim to his madness. Starved dead litter the streets, wearing the skin and body parts of their neighbors and families. People gorge themselves to death, eating anything they can get their hands on, until they asphyxiate or burst from the inside. One woman filmed herself removing the skin from the bottom half of her face and torso, exposing muscle and organs, and then walking around to show off her work. This caught on like a viral trend. People gathered in groups to help each other strip the flesh from their bodies. In one area, a new group emerged that collected the unwanted skin. They sewed it together to construct morbid pavilions. These small communities soon grew, needing to expand. They would send potential prospects to collect more materials. The flesh farmers, as they were often called, evolved in methodology. Developing an obsession with flesh and bone, they created everything out of other people. Beds, furniture, companions. They bathed in blood and excrement, feeding only on fresh tissue. I'm not entirely sure the flesh farmers are even human any longer. Their misshapen forms have changed, becoming longer, gray, and sharper. Some have taken to calling them goblins, which is grimly fitting. People are often convinced they are someone or something else, taking on different personalities or even animalistic urges. Some thinking that a random family is their own, becoming unhinged, often violent when they don't recognize them. Some believing they can fly, breathe underwater, or that they are even apex predators, stalking people in the night. This phenomenon isn't even restricted to the places visited by the god. It seems to be also influenced by other suggestive means, such as random whispers on the wind, scents, or subliminal images placed online and in media by those indoctrinated in madness. The thing about madness is that it can take root anywhere. And once it does, it spreads like a disease. It's hard to know what events are happening by random chance and what is being influenced by these malevolent entities.
What's up? What's going on, my dudes and dudettes? Or, I don't know, whatever. We're back, man. And we're doing it how we always do it. We drop the fucking beats, dude. You know? You come back, cause consistently we do some shit where you're like, oh man, this dude's kinda weird, but, you know, I'm into it. Yeah, you are. And then at the end, we drop the fucking beats, dude. I mean, come on, man. What else could you want? Name it. Go down to the comment section right now and fucking name it. Tell me what you want. I bet nothing, cause you already got it, dude. You already fucking got it, man. Yeah, that's what's up, alright? So, enjoy what, you know, all the stuff. Enjoy it all, cause it's for you. Cause we love ya. Yeah. Like, subscribe, share, hit the bell, tap it, love it gingerly, and come back. You know what? No, fuck that. Don't come back. Don't even leave. Just stay here with us forever.